2 years ago, I started a fight, and I wrote an article titled The Colorado Trail versus the John Muir Trail, Which One is Best? And obviously, there's a right answer, and it was my opinion. That's the objective right answer. But people like to duke it out in the comments. However, there was a piece missing from that puzzle. If you're familiar with the Triple Tiara, which is the triple crown of the smaller trails, the Colorado Trail, the John Muir Trail, and the Long Trail, I had not brought the Long Trail yet into the equation. Luckily, this past year, I got the chance to thru-hike the Long Trail, so now I can finally make a video, Colorado Trail versus John Muir Trail versus the Long Trail, which trail is the best? And again, there is an obvious, objective, correct answer. Hi, my name is Katie, aka Double Dip. I've thru-hiked the Triple Tiara trails as well as the Continental Divide Trail, and I pride myself on being able to have incredibly strong opinions based on subjective criteria. So let's get into it. First, let's do a quick roundup of what these trails are and kind of what the numbers are and where they even take you in the first place. Let's start with the Colorado Trail. The Colorado Trail is 486 miles of just beautiful mountain views through Colorado. You are hiking from Denver, Colorado to Durango, Colorado, and you're hiking either west to east or east to west, meaning you are crossing up and over these bands of mountain ranges as opposed to following one continuous ridgeline. People tend to love it because it's very social and a very good trail for a beginner, but some of the challenges include dealing with high altitude and also the risk of lightning strikes above treeline. Next, let's talk about the John Muir Trail. The John Muir Trail is 211 miles from Yosemite National Park to the summit of Mount Whitney, which is the highest point in the contiguous U.S. It follows the spine of the Sierra Nevada mountain range, which means you are staying relatively high the entire time and popping up and over these mountain passes almost every day. It's known for having these really wonderful alpine lakes to swim in, as well as beautiful views of the granite mountains around you, but some of the tricky parts include getting a permit in the first place and having to deal with the resupply, which can be very logistically confusing. Finally, the Long Trail, which is 272 miles from tip to tail of Vermont, or tail to tip if you are hiking northbound. It follows the rugged spine of the Green Mountains through Vermont, and you pass through a lot of very quaint and historic small towns, but you also have to deal with a lot of rain, a lot of humidity, and the really difficult terrain of the trail itself. Obviously, when we talk about how good a trail is, a lot of it's very subjective, so I've come up with 3 categories to score each trail so we can at least try to make this somewhat objective by the end of it. Those 3 categories are difficulty, sufferfest, and views along the way. When we talk about difficulty, I think I'm going to split it into 2 main things, and that's the just mental toll that fear takes and also the physical toll the trail takes on a body. The John Muir Trail, in my opinion, is the easiest of the 3 trails, both mentally and physically. You're above treeline a lot less often on the John Muir Trail, so even if there is a thunderstorm, it's probably easier to pop down to treeline, and that trail is so well maintained and so well graded the entire way, even though you're gaining and losing a lot of elevation each day, it doesn't really feel like it. It's like the fair weather friend of trails. You're in the rain shadow of the Sierra Nevada, so it's probably not going to rain as much as the other trails, although I wouldn't plan on there being no rain at all. And even if you do get wet, it's not very humid, so you can simply lay out your gear in the hot sun and dry everything out very quickly. The Colorado Trail, on the other hand, sometimes feels like it's trying to smite you down. You are above treeline for these huge extended stretches. There's one stretch near the end of the trail near Durango where you're above treeline for about 30 miles. Especially if you're hiking this trail in the peak seasons, typically, from June to September, the risk of monsoons and the risk of those heavy afternoon thunderstorms is very high, and the odds that you're going to get caught above treeline in a lightning storm is not close to 0. While the trail itself is incredibly well maintained and incredibly well graded, there's a lot of mental toll taken every day of worrying about your physical safety on the trail, or at least there was for me. When we come to the Long Trail, there's not that much to be that afraid of. Sure, there's obviously ticks and Lyme disease that are more prevalent out east, but the main thing I was thinking about every day is just how physically hard this trail is. As the oldest trail in America, it was literally created before the invention of switchbacks, so you were heading straight up a mountain before turning around and heading straight down a mountain, and typically that path is just very slippery rock. If I'm giving out scores, I'm going to give the John Muir Trail a 5 out of 10 for difficulty, solely because if something does go wrong, you're so remote that it's really hard to get help, and that can be scary. I'm going to give the Colorado Trail a 6 out of 10 for difficulty, because the trail itself is pretty easy, but if you're caught in some bad weather, that can be terrifying. The Long Trail, though, I'm going to give that an 8 out of 10 for difficulty, because even if you're hitting it in the best of circumstances, that terrain is going to grind you down until your ego is dust. This brings us to the second criteria, which is the sufferfest of it all. Probably 80% of your experience of a thru hike will boil down to these nitty-gritty situational details that totally could change trail to trail and have no bearing on the actual goodness of the trail itself. However, I'm here to make strong statements based on subjective criteria, so I'm going to be pulling from my own experiences on these trails. The Colorado Trail was my first thru hike, and I like to think of it as someone's first love. Absolutely perfect, absolutely beautiful. I look back and I can't remember a single flaw of the entire trail the entire way. I made wonderful friends. It was an excellent trail to take on as a solo female backpacker, and I found it to be the perfect blend of physical challenge to reward at the end. It's the longest trail of the three, and I found that I really liked that. It took me 4 weeks to finish this trail, which was enough time that I really felt ingrained in the trail culture and ingrained in my daily experiences on the trail. As far as a thru hike goes, nothing really went wrong. I had some blisters for the first 100 or so miles, and obviously at the end I was getting a little homesick, but I have nothing really negative to say about the sufferfest of the CT. I had a particularly rainy year when I went through, so I do think I spent more time damp than the typical hiker of the CT would, but that didn't even dull the sparkle of the trail itself. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I kind of think it's really hard to have a bad time on the Colorado Trail. You know what's not hard to have a bad time on? The John Muir Trail, because let me break down my trail experience for you. In the 14 days between starting the trail and ending in Yosemite Valley, I got a concussion, I tore the meniscus in my knee, I got really bad food poisoning, probably because I was dehydrating my own salmon chowder for dinners on the trail. I couldn't keep anything down. I pooped my pants because of that, started peeing blood, and then got hit by Hurricane Hillary randomly in the middle of the trail. I spent so many nights just crying in my tent, and the thing that sucks about the John Muir Trail is if you're having a bad time, you can't just get to a town, take a few days off, mentally reset, and let some bad weather pass. You're just out there. Not to mention the fact that I thru-hiked this in 2023, which was a historically high snow year for the Sierra. Even though I didn't thru-hike it until August, the river crossings were still terrifying. And on top of that, I still had to use technical mountaineering skills and learn how to use an ice axe and get comfortable with spikes while on this thru hike. One day I will go back and redeem this trail in my head, but for now, the sufferfest of the JMT is pretty high. And that brings us to the long trail, which is honestly the trail I expected to be the worst in terms of suffering. I mean, it's out east. You're going to get the humidity, you're going to get the bugs, and you're going to get that really challenging trail condition the entire way. Luckily, I was very pleasantly surprised. I hiked it in October, which meant the bulk of the crowds had left the area, and so had the bulk of the bugs. The temperatures were very cool, very crisp, and even though the evening temperatures got down to be a little bit chilly, I was really enjoying watching all the foliage turn as I made my way north. I don't know if a thru hike can ever really be described as relaxing, because at the end of the day, I was still hiking 20 miles a day, which is pretty not relaxing, but it was a very meditative experience, and I loved just being alone in the green tunnel of the beautiful woods of Vermont. Plus, on top of that, I did get very lucky with the weather. It only rained one day, which I do think is pretty abnormal for the long trail. If I'm giving it a score, I would say the sufferfest of the long trail is a 6, only because it does have the capacity to get pretty bad if you hit it within a bad weather window. The Colorado Trail, I'm going to give a sufferfest of 3. I'm sure if you're someone who really struggles with elevation, there is the ability to really hate that trail since you're spending so much time at very high elevations. But other than that, it's a wonderful trail just to relax and have a good time on. The John Muir Trail, I'm going to give a 7. Did I get comically unlucky? Yes, I'm sure. But I was suffering for the majority of that trail, and since it's only 2 weeks long, there's not as much time to redeem it if something goes wrong. This brings us to our last category, which is eye candy, the visuals. Which trail is visually the most stunning? I typically try to be very diplomatic when I'm talking about hiking out east versus hiking out west. I think there are a lot of snobs out west who don't understand how challenging it is to hike out east. I get very frustrated when I hear someone say it's only 4,000 feet tall, and they don't realize that you start at 0 and then you go 4,000 feet straight up. It sounds very naive to me when someone says hiking out east isn't as challenging as hiking out west. And I know that I'm just delaying the backlash that I'm going to get when I say that I don't think the views on the long trail can even compare to the views on the other two trails. Was there a quiet beauty to it? Yes. Did I love watching the wildlife? Did I love watching the trees change as I changed elevations? Yes. If you hold up my pictures of the long trail to my pictures of the Colorado Trail and the John Muir Trail, it's just not the same. I'm never going to be someone who asks for this when I could have this, or this, or this, or this, or this, or this. I'm sorry. It's just not a competition. The Long Trail is not as pretty as the other two. When we start talking about the Colorado Trail versus the John Muir Trail in terms of prettiness, that's where things get interesting. Obviously, both trails are beautiful, but they're beautiful in very different ways, and that's because you're hiking in a very different way. The John Muir Trail follows the spine of the mountain, meaning you are going up and over a pass pretty much every day, and you're staying very high up on a ridgeline. The Colorado Trail, by comparison, is going over those bands of mountains we talked about earlier. So you go from very high alpine experience down into a valley, back up to the alpine, back down into a valley. It's really hard to compare the two, but don't worry, I'm going to do it. What I would say at the end of the day is that the Colorado Trail has higher highs than the John Muir Trail, but it also has lower lows. The John Muir Trail is stunning for every single mile, but it's also very visually similar the entire way. With the Colorado Trail, you get a lot more variety, and sometimes that variety does mean things get worse. Specifically in sections 16 through 17, when you're going through Cochetopa Valley, you're going to get probably 2 days of just dry, flat, arid nothing surrounded by a couple of cows. It's still very pretty. You get mountains in the distance, but if we're just looking at those 2 days, that would probably be the worst view on the entire JMT. However, once you get through that section and you get into the San Juans, you were just greeted with some of the most beautiful views I've ever seen in my entire life. I have been to many mountain ranges in America. I've been to the Wind River Range. I've been to the Smokies. I've been to the Sierra. The San Juan Mountains are the most beautiful mountains I've ever been to in my entire life. Not to mention, if you're hiking the Colorado Trail during a typical season, you're hitting it at peak wildflower season. You're hiking through these beautiful emerald green hills with striation of mineral deposits and maybe some patches of pure white snow and just these blooms of wildflowers the whole way. I don't even know what to say. It's so pretty. You have to go. You have to experience this. By comparison, the John Muir Trail has all of these very towering, very dramatic, jagged cliff faces made out of granite. If you've ever seen pictures of Mount Whitney and all of those little spires and all of the very gray rock coming up from the ground, that's what it looks like for pretty much the whole way. And that's stunning, but I do think there's something to be said about appreciating a view more when you've walked through 2 days of cow pasture to get there. For the Long Trail, I will give it a prettiness score of 3. And I'm sorry, it is beautiful. And if you're from the area, please know that I did appreciate that trail. It just wouldn't feel like I'm being honest if I sat here and tried to pretend like I thought the views on the Long Trail held a candle to the views out west. The John Muir Trail, I will give a prettiness score of 8. It's stunning. It is absolutely beautiful. Is my opinion slightly clouded by the fact that I was throwing up every time I tried to look up to take in a view? Yes, I'm sure. But even still, I'm going to give the Colorado Trail a prettiness score of a 10. I cannot imagine a better experience than the Colorado Trail. Visually, socially, trail maintenance-wise, all of it is wonderful. It's the perfect amount of challenge, the perfect amount of view payoff, the perfect amount of socialization to make friends. I have only positive things to say about the Colorado Trail. So which trail reigns supreme? I'm sure no one listening is surprised when we added up the scores, and it is the Colorado Trail. Doo-doo! Followed closely, of course, by the John Muir Trail, and then bringing up the rear is the Long Trail, although I do need to say that I did appreciate the Long Trail much more than I thought I would, and I would actually go back and hike it again. I know I'm right. You don't need to tell me I'm right. I already know. But if you think that I'm wrong for any reason, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your rationale, even though I don't agree with you. Anyways, I hope to see you out there, hopefully surrounded by the wildflowers of the Colorado Trail, dipping in a lake in the San Juans. Happy trails!